Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the special series Euros Group Talk. Where today we're going to be talking about Group C. In this four-episode special series, I will be joined by a special guest to break down and have a deep dive into one of the groups. Making a return to the podcast one more time today, he's joined me before to talk about Sweden, different Scandinavian teams in the Champions League, the women's Irish team, but today he'll be joining me to talk about Group C that has Sweden, Denmark, Germany, and Poland. It's none other than Philip O'Connor. Phil, it's great to have you back on here. How have you been doing?
The honest answer to that question, Mariam, is I don't know. I keep meeting myself coming back because there's so much going on. But that's the life of a freelance journalist in sports. It's absolutely brilliant. There's so many great things that have happened. It's actually, as you say, it's been a minute since we last spoke, so we had a great situation here in Stockholm, Sweden, where I live, because obviously Hammarby made it into the group stages of the Women's Champions League. We had St. Pölten here, we had Manchester City here, and we had Barcelona here. So things have been going really, really well, but it's been really busy. And it's about to get an awful lot more busy because very soon I'm going to be heading down to Switzerland for the Euros. And who knows, you may even be speaking to me from somewhere near Zurich at some point during the tournament, depending on how things go.
Last time we connected, it was about actually Ireland and how much of a breakout year they had. I want to say back in 2023, and sort of the hope back then was that we'll be talking about them in the Euros. It's not happening this time, perhaps maybe next time, but today we'll be focused on Sweden and Sweden's group, which is Group C. And I think I said it off air earlier, but it's Group C for Group Chaos because I feel like this one's gonna have a lot of action.
This is going to be so much fun because I've been sitting for the last few days, and let's break the fourth wall here a little bit. I was late to this meeting that we're doing this on, right? Because I've been sitting with the preview material, right? So we're going through all the teams, and we're going through all the games, and we're going through all the players, and we're going through who can win and what the odds are from the bookmakers and this kind of thing. And we had to get it all done by a certain time because all this stuff has to be packaged and sent out, to the people that the news agency I work for, so that they can use it in good time. And my head has just been full of this stuff. And I've changed my mind so many times about not just every group, but every team and every player. And one time I'll be sitting there going, oh, Switzerland have no chance whatsoever. They're all fighting and it's Pia Sundhage. And then you look and you go, well, hang on a second. They might just do something here. And one of those groups, of course, is Group Chaos. It's Group C there, where, of course, what do we got? We got Germany, we got Sweden, we got Denmark, and we got Poland in there, right? And that's just a recipe for chaos if ever there was one.
It's a hell of a group. I think when I was watching the draw and saw those teams coming together, I think the Euros are always such a knockout event, and I feel like this group is just going to have all that action-packed material in it. So let's talk about Sweden. Obviously, a huge, big European team that notoriously does well in the Euros, but they've been hiccups along the way. We know the squad that's heading out to Switzerland. How do you assess that squad out of a very, very talented pool and a consistently talented pool I think Sweden has?
Yeah, there's a couple of interesting things about it. Let's look at who isn't in the squad first, right? So there's one player who isn't in this squad that I gotta say I'm stunned that she wasn't in there, and that's Felicia Schroeder, who plays for BK Häcken on the west coast down in Gothenburg, right? Felicia's a forward, small, just keeps putting the ball in the back of the net. And of course, that's what the game is all about. And she's not in the squad, right? So when I look at this squad, her absence, you're kind of looking at the squad and going, who is in there? Who's taken her place? The answer to that question is a Hammarby forward called Ellen Wangerheim. Okay. Ellen she was in the Champions League. She's a really, really good player. Great potential. Would remind you a lot of Stina Blackstenius, who's also somebody we're going to be talking about at great length. I watched her recently. I was at the derby between Djurgården and Hammarby there a week ago. And I was watching Ellen, and I was really impressed with how, even in the few months since their Champions League campaign ended, the Damallsvenskan, the Swedish top flight league, that's already started again because it plays all the way through the summer.
Yeah.
And I've been really impressed with how her game has developed, even in the last 6 months. So there's so much that Ellen Wangerheim has learned in that time that she's already putting into her game. I think she's been watching Blackstenius because she's become much better at sort of, using her body to hold up the ball. But she's a tremendous finisher, and she's somebody who, she's not going to start too many games. She might start the last game as Sweden are already through, and, nothing matters there. But I do think that she's somebody you're going to see coming off the bench and having a big impact for Sweden. Yeah. For the rest of them, I think this is one of those, this is the last night with the gang for a lot of people in this team, right? There's a lot of old heads in there, a lot of very, very good players. And I always find this almost a little bit sad. It's almost a little bit melancholic, Mariam, because
Mm,
there's some tremendous servants to Sweden there. You've got Magdalena Eriksson, you've got Sofia Jakobsson, Linda Sembrant, you've got Kosovare Asllani. We
yeah.
don't know if this is the last dance. I'm guessing it is for a lot of them, and there's a lot of bright, talented young players coming through. But these are the players who, if we go back to when Sweden hosted the Euros in 2013, lost to Germany in the semi-finals down in Gothenburg, one of the best games I've ever seen live. It was just, and the atmosphere was incredible. But so many of those girls have come to the end of the road. Hedvig Lindahl is already gone. Nilla Fischer is already gone. Lotta
Mm,
Schelin is already gone. But the last of that generation, who for me, Sweden have always been a brilliant women's national team, right? But
yeah.
these were people that, they were the sort of the vanguard. They were the people who put the game on the map, not just in Sweden, but in these breakout seasons for Lyon, in these breakout seasons for Chelsea, and in the Women's Super League, and indeed in Barcelona with Fridolina Rolfö at the moment. These are people who have given so much to the game, and this could very well be their last dance in the Alps.
I think when we assess last Euros stats in terms of it was the younger teams that did really well, it was the youth, but I think the veterans and sort of we're going to call them, I don't want to call the older folks, but sort of those veterans once again are so important to keep that winning mentality for that young youth coming in. And Ellen is a player that I think is going to have hopefully a fantastic Euros because she's just so good. And you highlight Sina Blackstenius as a player who she's clearly picking things from. Stina Blackstenius has been the talk of the town, coming off a historic Champions League winning goal final, goes off with Sweden, scores a hat trick. Everybody's looking at Stina Blackstenius.
She is one of the most fascinating players I have ever come across, right? Start with her surname, okay? Nobody else in Sweden is called Blackstenius. You can change your name here, but you can't change it to something existing or that you don't have a family tie to. So somehow her dad came up with this name. There's no other. You can go through the phone book if you still have physical phone book. You're not going to find him. And you won't find a player like Stina either. Stina is one of those players who, the way they used to talk about Moneyball in baseball in the States, right? And they talked about, what's the probability? And if you do the same thing 100 times, what's the likelihood that you're going to succeed? How often will you succeed? And that kind of thing. And that very much reminds me of Stina Blackstenius as a player because she has certain things she does, right? Basically, she hangs on the shoulder of the last defender and she rolls the dice every single time, right? And half of the time she's going to be offside, and the other half of the time she's going to score the winner of the Champions League final. And it's brilliant to see because now, and that's almost, I don't want to talk her down by putting it that simplistically. There's obviously so many other things about her game. Her pressing, her defending is so much better since she went to England. She's
Mm,
so much more of an intelligent defender now. She doesn't just sort of charge at people. She tries to steer where the ball is going next so that she can close down that space as well. She's really developed immensely now over at Arsenal. But for somebody like that, to see her finally having her moment, it seems to me that this is her prime. That the last few months of the Women's Super League and that goal in the Champions League final, that all of a sudden it has clicked for her. And if you want to look, here is a player who could actually dominate the Euros. Like if I was
mhm.
Peter Gerhardsson, the coach, who's a big lover of Irish rock music, by the way. Yeah, he's a big lover of a band called the Fontaines, that kind of thing. But if I was him, I would be saying, okay, this is the point. She is the star at the top of our Christmas tree.
Mm,
How do we get her the ball in the places where she can do what she needs to do, which is stick it in the back of the net, right?
yeah.
If you look at Italy, if you look at all these other teams, maybe Norway with Oda Hegerberg and Caroline Graham Hansen, they're going to try to build things up in a different way. I would be looking specifically to get the ball to Stina's feet or to get
Mm.
it on her head, but specifically to get the ball. How you do that, I would be telling my players, I do not care, right? But you get that ball to her and you do it as quickly as possible. Because if you give her that, she has the speed, both in her mind and in her feet, to make the decision and the technique to execute on that decision that will get you goals. And anything else like that, take her off and put in Ellen Vangerheim, okay? But put her in a position to succeed, and Sweden are going to succeed in Switzerland.
I think what I love about Black Tennis, and you just mentioned that earlier, is just unpredictable. One time she's offside, the second time she's offside, third time, it's the 90th minute and she's scoring that winner. She's unpredictable and she's so tough to defend. Any other player that you think is going to be just monumental for Sweden if they are to make a run out to the final and come back with a few gold medals around their necks?
Yeah, because let's remember, I think the only major tournament that Sweden has ever actually won the gold is in 1984, which was,
Yeah.
it wasn't called the Euros back then, but it
No.
was effectively the Euros. And that's the thing. They've had two Olympic silver medals, one of which they won, the other which they lost to your native Canada, obviously. And that doesn't sit too well with them. And again, I kind of felt sorry when Caroline Seger retired there a little while
Mm.
ago from the national team and from football in general. Now, Caroline suffered with injuries at the end of her career, but Seger, whose name Seger means victory in Swedish, right? She never actually got that gold medal. But in order for them to win one now in Switzerland in the Euros, I think one player is going to be very, very, very key to the whole thing, and that's Jennifer Falk. Sweden has always produced absolutely brilliant goalkeepers, but Falk is one of those people who, in the modern game, I find it hard to think of a goalkeeper who is as comfortable with all aspects of the game, right? And by that, I mean defending her own box when the ball is in the other end of the field, right? Knowing where to be to cut out those long balls, but not so far forward that you're going to get one knocked over your head into the net.
Yeah.
She's an absolutely brilliant reflexive shot stopper. She's very good on penalties. She's very calm. She has the driest sense of humor with the worst jokes you're going to come across, but she's also very, very good with her feet, right?
Yeah.
And when you have wingers and attacking players like Kosovare Asllani, like Johanna Rytting Conrad, Sophia Jakobsson, all these players who are a little bit further forward,
Mm.
she has these lovely chipped passes that she can hit over the first line of defense or over the defensive central midfielders there, and she can find those people very, very consistently, right? Hedvig
Mm.
Lindahl is somebody I love dearly and is somebody who has done tremendous things in Swedish football. I would say Jennifer's abilities with her feet probably top, and Hedvig became very good in the later part of her career because, of course, this is not something that we've always asked goalkeepers to
No.
do. We're only going back a few years to the point where the goalkeeper had to take the kickouts by themselves. Now you can just tap it to somebody in the box, and you look like Ronaldinho. But now that doesn't exist anymore. They have to be much, much better in
Mm.
this sort of, sweeper, last defender role, and then also use your hands to block shots and that. So I think Jennifer's going to be very important. I think that Magdalena Eriksson is going to be very important as well. Magda has gone into some tournaments and she hasn't been 100% fit, right?
Hmm.
Not the most physically imposing of women, but a tremendous header of the ball. And that she is the character of that team. She is the DNA of that team. She learned at the knee of all these great players going back to that Euro 2013 tournament. I think she took part in that one. And that to me is going to be key. So those two in particular, Blackstenius, absolutely. She is the one I think if things go well for Stina Blackstenius, things will go well for Sweden. But she's going to have the things that the Swedes have always been good at, even when they didn't have Lotta Schelin in great form or when they didn't have Blackstenius. And that is that idea of be organized, right? Be hard to beat. The big mistake that Denmark made in the recent friendly, which they lost 6-1 here in Stockholm,
Yeah.
was Denmark just handed them goals. The same thing happened when England played against Norway and lost 8-0 in Brighton a few years back. It's like,
Hmm.
don't make it easy for these teams. Why would you do that? And Sweden is going to have to do that. Certain players, and that's one of those things that comes with experience as well. Youthful players sometimes make youthful mistakes.
Mm.
And that's something that Magdalena Eriksson stopped doing a long, long time ago. So if you can get those more senior players in key positions, and I would say that they are goalkeeper, centre back, centre midfield, and centre forward, they're really the things that you need to have sorted out. The rest will take care of itself because
Yeah.
the young creative players, let them not have any fear on the wings, right? But in the middle, let's keep it tight so that Sweden can do things.
I'm particularly looking forward to Falk sort of again releasing those wide players from a one kick shot and just seeing an attack go from there. I think that is going to be a big part of perhaps Sweden's approach into this. But Falk's going to have a huge task on her hand because there's some elite attacking players that are present in this group of Pernilla Harder with Denmark, Pajor with Poland, and I mean a bunch of them with Germany. So let's talk about Denmark here that you just mentioned with a recent friendly 6-1 to Sweden. Not a very positive result. They have an over reliance of Pernilla Harder.
There
And
was Yeah, let me tell you a little story that somebody who shall remain nameless, who was in the Danish coaching staff a few years ago. And I was talking to him one day on the phone. He says, Phil, you know what the biggest problem is with the Danish women's national team? And I said, what is that? He said, we've only one Pernilla Harder. He said, we could do it two, maybe even three of them, and we'd be good. And that has been the case for many years. And I think with Blackstenius, right, she is the opposite of Stina Blackstenius because Stina does some things, like three or four things, really, really well at an elite Champions League winning level, right? Pernilla Harder could play anywhere on the soccer pitch, excluding goalkeeper, and be the player of the game every time. MVP, whatever team she plays in, that's her. And that is the biggest problem that Denmark has. Because if you play Pernilla Harder as a deep lying playmaker, somewhere picking up the ball around the centre circle, bringing your wide players into play and that kind of thing, you know who you want at the end of those balls in the box? You want Pernilla Harder, but she's 30 metres the other direction, right? And this has been the problem for every Danish coach. And if she continues to play in the national team, this is going to be the problem for the new coach as well, because they've never managed to solve that particular riddle. And just before the pandemic, I was down at the Algarve Cup in Portugal, and Denmark were playing Norway. And I think she pretty much just scored from the kickoff, you know? And you go, how has this not been a thing? You know, why have we not been doing this? And in one way, it's a good thing because obviously, if you have one of the most talented players ever to play the game, it's great to have that in your team. But there's two things. One is that others in the team tend to rely on her. You know, it's kind of, okay, we've got the ball. What do? We give it to Pernilla. Okay. No, give it to somebody else and let her decide what she wants to do because she's a tremendous reader of the game. If you see Pernilla Harder making a run into space, if I see her sprinting into space, I'm giving her the ball, right? If I see her jogging, I'm not giving her the ball because she hasn't made up her mind what she wants to do yet. And it's been so difficult because she is so good at taking that responsibility. And because the results are so good when she does, it masks the fact that Denmark are underachieving, right?
Yep.
And again, when I was sitting there stroking my increasingly grey beard recently, thinking about what I was going to write about Denmark, I was thinking that are Denmark a bad football team? Are they bad technical and tactical footballers? No, they're extremely good. The fundamental technique of the average Danish kid just playing on the street or playing on the local park is really, really high. And they're incredibly well sort of tactically educated. Danish people and Danish fans, they understand the game. But when you have a player who is otherworldly like Pernilla Harder, you just go, you know what, I'm going to take a backseat here. They can be quite humble in their own way too. And I think that's the big problem. And that's not to say Pernilla is absolutely not a diva. She is not the kind of person who says, in some other teams you have a player who says, hey, this team is about me. This is my team here, almost like it was like a basketball team. That's not who she is. She'll do whatever she's asked to do, whether she thinks it's a good idea or not. And that really, to me, is both, you know, the strength and the downfall of the Danish national women's team.
Yep. As a Danish player, I can almost imagine your brain's telling you to do this. Just go, just keep running. But your feet are just somehow passing the ball over to Pernille Harder. It's like they cannot resist it. Can they solve this with the new head coach?
Um, I don't know. I think the summer will tell us a lot because Andre
Yep.
Jäglitz is a Swedish coach. He's going to be doing his best. And I think it's good to have somebody coming in from outside like Jäglitz. Now, I think that his team, the 6-1 friendly defeat against Sweden, everybody goes, oh, this is terrible. And everybody thinks that that's going to be repeated in the Euros.
No.
It's not, right? Jäglitz was trying things. He was asking players to do things. I was actually speaking to a men's coach recently who used to coach the Swedish national team. And we were talking about how those of us in the media who are looking in from the outside, a lot of the time we can see things, we can see tendencies and patterns, and we can see things that we think the players have been told to do, but we don't have the match plan. We haven't sat in the room or in the locker room and seen the PowerPoint presentation and the video clips. So sometimes we're looking at something and we don't have all the facts to hand. You know, it's like walking in on the last day of the court case and being asked to make a judgment. Nobody's going to get that right, you know. But I think, and I suspect that Jäglitz was trying out things, that he was telling players to do things, and he was encouraging players to make mistakes. And man, did they ever make mistakes against Sweden, right? But that's okay because all that is a game you played in, you lost 6-1. The embarrassment is over. The most important thing to do now is to learn from those mistakes, right? How do you stop Stina Blackstenius doing what she did, right? Certain strikers in this world, I don't believe that you can mark certain strikers with just one person, right? I don't believe, and the really good ones, you can't mark them zonally either. I think that you got to have two people there. One who's like, you know, very tight, and the other person who's there as the fire person, you know, like the fire marshal. When everything goes wrong, this person just goes in and smack, like, you know, and that has to be a sort of an express thing. And I think that Denmark are looking at that now because this is a very open group, right? One little upset, right? If Poland take 1 point of one team in this group, that's it. That's group chaos right there. Like, because that changes the whole paradigm for absolutely everybody. Because, you know, and again, I felt bad writing it today. I was saying, like, Germany and Sweden are going to think that they have what they need to be the top two in that group, right? But Eva Pajor is sitting in the background there going, oh, you think? You ever heard of me? You heard of me? The girl who scored 47 goals in 46 games for Barcelona? Yeah, I got something to say about that.
Man, have they been watching her as they should? And I think Poland have done exactly what has been asked from them, which is secure promotion to League A in the Nations League. And they sort of are the underdogs. They're going into this as their first major tournament, but they've got players that I think will catch the eye. And I think, like you mentioned, a draw, just picking up points, is going to turn this entire table upside down.
And I think that's the big risk for the Germanys of this world and for the Swedens of this world, right? Because players and coaches and everybody in the staff will tell you, oh, no, no, we take each game as a cup. We don't underestimate anybody. You know what? That's not true, Mario, right? They will be looking at Poland going, okay, can we rest anybody for this game? You know, if somebody, if Magdalena Eriksson has a calf problem or if she's feeling a little bit in her knee, could we possibly not play her? And Eva Toyor is going to have a party if they don't, right? She's going to go absolutely nuts. So from that point of view, and I think you mentioned at the beginning that we were talking about Ireland and the great sort of couple of seasons that they had,
Hmm.
and now Poland have sort of, if Katie McCabe was the player behind Ireland's lift into the sort of, the really top level of European football, Pajor is the one who's done it for Poland for me. The difference, I would say, is that Poland to me, they look an awful lot more sustainable because
Mm,
they have a fundamental idea of the way they want to play the game, right? They know who they are. They're not going to go out there and try to be, Matas Brazil, right? They know that's not what they're going to be doing here. In the same way that Italy won't do that, Portugal won't do that. These teams know now that you
mm,
can't go out and be like Thailand, where the World Cup a few years ago. If you want to progress and if you want to earn respect and if you want your players to be in the shop window for Wolfsburg and for Barcelona and Bayern Munich and Chelsea, then you have to deliver solid performances on the pitch, right? So I'd say Poland are going in there. Some coaches will tell you, okay, we want to get to last four. We want to get into the top three. We want a medal out of this. Some coaches will tell you, oh, we want to get out of the group. I don't think Poland have any expectation whatsoever. I think their thing is to go out there and not worry about the results, but to make sure that their performances, that they maximize every single second of this Euros in terms of learning. Because if they do that, then they will put themselves in a position to beat Sweden and Denmark and Germany. And the idea of a team like Poland beating Germany in a major tournament, we all go, that's impossible, right? But this is kind of what England did to Spain when they beat them recently in England, right?
hmm.
Spain dominated the game, right? But and this is the thing, because you have the trump card in Pajor. Pajor can find a goal out of absolutely anywhere, right? And it's almost surprising that in the Champions League final as it was, who would have expected it would be Blackstenius and not Pajor who got the winning goal in that game? Because that's also what she does. They're very good at transitional play. They will punish you for losing the ball high up the field. They're
Mm.
physical, they're aggressive. And I honestly think that, at the end of this tournament, the day after, when I'm sitting in the airport leaving Zurich after this is over, I think I'm going to be looking back and go at Poland and going, I'm looking forward to seeing what's coming next for these guys because they've
Yeah.
given a really good account of themselves.
Yeah, I think whatever they end up doing this Euros, there's not going to be a bad mistake. I think as they're debuting, their first ever goal is going to be a historic piece of learning. Their first win, their first loss, their first draw, whatever it may be. I think it's gonna say a lot about the future of this Polish team. You bring up Germany because I think that Germany Poland game is going to be one that I would not want to bet money on because I could come out with some huge losses or huge wins. Who knows? But there's been some talk about Germany and the managerial environment, perhaps some disconnect. I was going through some of his interviews as of recently, and there was a recent one with FIFA, and he was talking about how the team is managing some disadvantages with it being a transition, some players being retiring just recently, and giving opportunities for the young talent. Is that something he's expressing of concern, or is he just being frank with the position that the team is in?
I think he's trying to get us to take our eye off the ball, right? This team lost the final 3 years ago, man, right?
Yeah.
Don't go telling me that this is some bunch of bums that are just, turning up and, oh, we're only here to make up the numbers. Sure, Poland will probably beat us. I'm not buying that for a second. I think what he's trying to do is he's trying to manage expectations on those young players because, again, I mentioned being at the Algarve Cup back there in 2020, just before the pandemic. And Germany put out a B team in one of those games, and these girls were still unbelievable. They
Yeah.
were just off the charts. And I really enjoyed watching them. I was thinking, now, I'm not actually sure. I'll have to go back over the squads from then and now and see how many of those players that started that day are in this squad. But the point I would make is that, German football is still extremely strong. Okay. It may have been overtaken by Spain and France in terms of the European level in recent years, but Wolfsburg and Bayern Munich in particular, and there's a few other clubs there at the top of the Bundesliga, Frauen, which things are happening there. They have there's easily 23 really top class, if not world class players in there. I do think that there's a little bit of a different way in the way that there's a bit of a difference in the way they're approaching it, because normally
Mm.
Germany would have said, yes, well, of course we're among the favourites and we'll have to carry that responsibility. And now they're talking it down a little bit. It would suggest to me that they're trying to take the pressure off the players, because let's remember that if you go back to 2022 or
Mm.
2017, the level of interest now compared to 2017 in Netherlands, for instance, is exponentially huge. Like, it's just incredible. Or even go back to 2013 in Sweden. I remember covering that tournament, and I brought my family like on a sort of a camping tour around, because you could pick up tickets for, like, peanuts, and my wife and my children would go sit in the stands, and I'd sit in the press box cover the game, and then we'd drive to some campsite afterwards. That was our vacation that year. But that's not going to happen now. Like, these
Mm.
games, especially Germany's games, people are going to pour across the border from Germany to see that team, and there's an expectation on them, because people who support women's football in Germany are used to better things than this. They used to win everything. They used to be, by far the best team in Europe. For a long time, and it kind of sticks in their craw a little bit, certainly among the fans and among older players that
Mhm.
are long since retired, that they aren't that anymore. I think it's an interesting tactic to try to talk down their chances a little bit, but I do think that, like, I don't think anybody buys it. It's not just me that's not buying it. I think everybody thinks that they have got to make it out of that group, and they've really got to make it to the last four, because I think anything else, given the size and the scale of the culture of women's football in Germany, would probably be a bit of a disappointment, if not an outright failure.
Mhm. I mean, they're the eight-time world champions for a reason. So, with this quote, you sort of wouldn't even think that they're eight-time world champions.
It's
I
like,
think
has this dude even seen the Wikipedia page? What's he saying?
it's a big honors list, and there's some fantastic players in there. Leah Schuler, for me, has stepped up with Pop's retirement. They're going to be looking to, I would assume, I'm not in the camp, but I would assume, safe bet that they're looking to make finalists again. It's not going to be an easy route, I think, especially when you look at some of the brackets. But what is it for Germany to get on the podium again? Maybe not win a final, but get into that final again after what I think was a pretty positive Olympics run. And I don't think many people were expecting them to do what they did at the Olympics.
And I think they're suffering badly, because, like, it's one thing to lose a European final. It's another thing to lose a European final to England at Wembley. That is a psychological scar that's going to take a long time to
Uh,
heal. But I think on the sort of macro level, right, we have had a problem where the top flight league in Germany, people are kind of not looking at that anymore. Back in the day, it used to be the
mm,
Scandinavian leagues in Germany was pretty much the only place you could go, and you would have, half a dozen full-time players, or you'd have players on full-time wages that were meager wages, but they were still getting paid to play ball.
yeah.
But Germany has been eclipsed now by France, Spain, and England in recent years. It is not the top destination anymore, even though Wolfsburg are buying up everybody with a Norwegian passport at the moment, right? But it's not the number one destination. Bayern Munich. It used to be that, like, if Bayern Munich picked up the phone to a player's agent, they were going. It didn't matter what they offered; they were just going to go there.
Yeah.
Same thing for Wolfsburg. The same thing for Potsdam, beloved Potsdam, who are on their knees at the moment, right? But that's really what they're playing for, something more than just a title. They are playing for the reputation and the respect that German football once had, as you say, eight-time world champions for a reason, right? And that is the bigger prize for German football. It's not to win the trophy. It's to win back the pride they lost when Chloe Kelly scored the winner at Wembley. And that is almost as important as winning the tournament outright, because we're also in a sort of an attention economy. We're in an economy whereby eyeballs attract dollars, right?
Yep.
And big teams, like any of the other teams, apart from the top teams in Germany, they need an interest in the game. They need to have international players on their books, because that's what brings the crowds. That's what gets you on the TV at the weekend. It
Yep.
gets you into the Champions League. So it's not just an important a title or an important competition for the 23 girls in the squad and for the coaching staff around them. This is almost an existential thing for German football, because
Mm.
if you rest on your laurels, as Italy did for several years, I mean, they made a couple of finals in the 90s. I think 93 and 97, they were in the finals, and they haven't been back there since in the European final, because they took it for granted, and everybody else just went by them in the fast lane. And Germany are in danger of that happening, because the WSL in England is getting money pumped into it. It's going to get bigger. Barcelona are drawing a massive amount of eyeballs to women's football in Spain, and then PSG and Lyon and Paris FC are that they're doing a similar thing. And German football needs to get its house in order if they're going to bring the fans back in and bring that money back in, that interest back in.
There's going to be more eyeballs than ever on a women's tournament, and this Euros is going to be just that in Switzerland. I sort of hate this question because I personally don't even know how to answer it. But who would be your favorite to go through from this group? Granted, I think it might even go down to some sort of goal difference, sort of tight situation.
Uh, my favorite to go through from this group is based on history, right? And that's
Mm,
all. So I would tip Germany to win the group, Sweden to come second, and that's it, right? Now, what I think will happen, I have no idea what will happen, right? There's like a hurricane could hit this group. Poland could top it. They could win 3 games, 1-0, and Eva Pajor could go on to be the top scorer in the whole tournament and this kind of thing. And Denmark, Pernilla hat-trick harder against Germany, and then she scores 1-0. Magdalena Eriksson, her partner, takes her down, and it's a penalty, and they win 1-0, and Germany and Sweden go home. And the margins are so tight because one of the last things I wrote before jumping on the call with you here, Mariam, wasn't there's obviously still a huge difference between the very top teams, and the top teams at the moment are Spain, England, Germany, and France, right? All of
yeah.
those are like Spain are bookmakers' favorites. England are second favorites at 4-1. Germany and France 5-1. After that, everybody else is in double figures, like 10, 11, 15-1. I think the
Wow.
Swedes are out there at 11-1 or something, right? So there's a difference between them. And then there's a difference between the sort of the middle pack of teams. We'll put Italy in there, we'll put Denmark in there, we'll put
Yeah.
Portugal in there, and then the debutantes like Wales and Poland, right? But we've seen in recent times, right, as Italy's sort of resurgence over the last 5 years has continued, Belgium have been beaten out the door by some really good teams, and they push some good teams really close. So it all depends on getting everything right on the day, and this is why I don't like a lot of the stuff that goes on in football at the moment in terms of the way they closet the players and restitution. Don't let them talk to the media, all this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So the warm ups that go on, they drive me absolutely bonkers. You see people running around for 45 minutes. Are you not tired? Would you not want to say that for the game? But when they get all those preparations right, and when they get the tactical analysis right and the game plan right, and you get players in a good mood who are ready to play,
Mm.
anything can happen. And that's not just true of group chaos. That's true of every group in this tournament. These are all the 16 best teams in Europe. They're all there for a reason. And any of them can win any game on any given night. And that is what is going to make this the best women's tournament you've seen to date.
Well, I mean, if you don't have plans to watch some of these games, I think you might now after listening to what Phil just breaking down this group. But I think just how good this tournament's going to be. Phil's going to be out there, like he mentioned. Where can people find that coverage? That, I'm sure we'll have you on back here if Sweden do a remarkably good, or who knows, Poland run to the final. It might be a little crazy, but we'll have you back on here talking. But where
I tell you
can
what,
people follow until
when
then?
well, when Eva Pajor scores her hat trick against Germany to win, I will be straight on. We're going to do a live special on She Scores Bangers about that hat trick, right? Because I hope to be there. But other than that, I spend a lot of my time on Blue Sky at the moment. It's the new social media platform that's kind of taken over from Twitter. And it's the same handle as I've always had it. It's at Philip O'Connor with one L in Philip. You'll find me in Mariam's DM. So if you guys want to know anything, ask Mariam. She'll pass the question on to me. It'll come back again. And then I'll be doing a lot of work this summer now for the Reuters news agency. So if you go to Reuters.com, I think you have to create a little login. It doesn't cost anything, but you can create a login, you can go there and you can follow all the coverage. And we're going to be based about 40 minutes outside of Zurich. So if you look at the match map, if you like, Basel is close by and Sion is a little bit further away and St. Gallen and that kind of thing. So we're going to be jumping around between the training grounds during the day and then the matches in the evening. So hopefully we'll be coming up with some great stories for Mariam and for your viewers and listeners out there to take part in.
If there's anybody that I'd recommend you go on to follow the coverage, I mean, behind the scenes, in the scenes, interviews with players, just overall assessment of how the tournament's going to play. It's going to be Phil's work. I'll leave the Reuters making a little account. It's going to cost you nothing down in the description, as well as where you can find Phil's work. Phil, safe flights down to Zurich, and I'm sure this is going to be a phenomenal tournament. And thanks for joining me to break it all down today.
The pleasure was all mine, Mariam. Good to talk to you.